The most iconic representation of fungus is that of the mushroom, and mushrooms are really fun drawing exercises because of the various species that they come in. Mushrooms can also be a really beautiful visual addition to many types of artworks, as they carry connotations of mysticism and easily integratable into various genres of art. With that being said, hey guys, my name is Matt. Welcome to another video by Art in Context, where we explore various art-related topics, and in today's video we will be breaking down the process of how to draw a few interesting mushrooms. Now in this tutorial we will be drawing specifically 4 different mushroom species, looking at some popular ones and some less popular ones. We will be looking at how to represent them in a realistic way through a very simple drawing process. So we will be looking at how to draw the chanterelle mushroom, the classic Amanita mushroom, an oyster mushroom, and the Boletus mushroom. Now these 4 different fungus species are really different, have very different visual qualities, making it a really good variety for understanding how to represent different mushrooms. Now we're going to start with the chanterelle mushroom, which is a really beautiful species of mushroom, as they have a very floral appearance. Their features are very soft and subtle and give a delicate feel as the cap of the mushroom coils and it sprouts from the center to produce this flower-like aesthetic. Now the way in which we're going to start is we start by sketching the form of the mushroom. So we want to start with a simple sketch of the mushroom, which we can do by basically sketching the outline of the mushroom at first. Now the form of the mushroom is quite similar to broccoli, where its stem gets slightly larger as it moves towards the cap of the mushroom. At the top of the mushroom it is coiled, it has this coiled fleshy cap which can be quite wavy at its edges, so we can draw this as a cloud-like shape, for instance, that sits on top of the mushroom stem. Now the caps do sprout out from the center of the mushroom and coil outward on itself with curvy edges, and once we have established the shape of the cap and the stem, we can then start to add in some ridges that form along the stem near the top of the mushroom. Now as the mushroom curves into the cap, its texture changes from a smooth to rigid surface, but from there we can then move on to sketching a few of these once we have the general idea of the outline. Now you can play around with adding a variety of them, some smaller to suggest that they are in the background. However, this is just a way in which we want to develop the sketch by understanding the general outline and then start to basically create a variety of them. But otherwise, once we have done that, we then want to proceed by slightly erasing and refining the mushroom sketch. So now that we have established the basic form of the mushrooms, we want to lightly erase them. Now we'll then basically use these ghost lines that we have left behind from erasing the mushroom to then slowly refine the mushroom. And this is where we can start to add in some details, giving more contrast to the ridges on the stem and in the center of the mushroom. We can also create a distinction between the smooth and rigid surface in the stem. We can add some shading along the top section of the stem that falls just underneath the coiled fleshy cap, and this is going to create a little bit more three-dimensionality in the structure, which we can add some shading to really represent the surface of the fleshy caps as well. From there we can move on to basically drawing some duplicates of the chanterelle mushroom, and now that we know how to draw the mushroom, we can then start to draw a few of them to create some variety. We can also play around with sizes and how they fall along the surface, but otherwise this is how we create the general, very easy to draw and very beautiful chanterelle mushroom. But as we proceed, we're going to now move on to a more iconic and familiar mushroom, and that is how to draw the Amanita mushroom. Now the Amanita mushroom is perhaps the most identifiable mushroom, as they have been used in pop culture, video games, and fantasy-based artworks. Amanita mushrooms seem magical, as if they are little houses for fairies. However, the process of drawing the Amanita mushroom in this case is done with just graphite pencil, but you can obviously apply color to your drawing process. But in this case, we're just trying to understand how to create a variety of different mushroom shapes. But the intention now will be to basically move on to the same process or sequence of steps, where we start by sketching the form of the mushroom first. So we want to start by drawing the stem of the mushroom, which could be identified as a normal stem that has a skirt near the middle of its stream. Now the skirt or the annulus is unique to the Amanita, so the stem that continues with the same width until it meets the bottom of the cap. We can draw the cap as this dome shape where it curves over the stem, which appears to move out of sight as it moves into the cap. Now we can then also add the dome on top of the mushroom, which is a classical dome shape. So when we draw this, we are thinking about that just classical curvature dome shape. And that being said, the Amanita can shift in its form, but then we can move on to basically drawing different shapes of the Amanita mushroom. So another way of drawing the Amanita is with the same stem, however this time we can draw it in the background and slightly larger. When the cap gets slightly larger, it does start to have a slightly bulging curve under the cap, and this will expose its ridges that run from the edges of the the cap to the center of the cap where the stem connects. Now when an Amanita is slightly smaller than the regular size, its cap is curved quite compactly, so this gives it a more bullet head shape where the dome's curve is slightly more aggressive. So you can look at some reference images and play around with the size and how much the actual mushroom sprouts in terms of its dome shaped cap. Now we're going to move on to erasing and refining the mushroom sketch. So we now can slightly erase the mushroom drawing. By doing this, we will want to work with those ghost lines to then refine each of the Amanita mushrooms. We want to make sure that we create a variety in size and shape with each Amanita mushroom, and we can also make sure that we make the cap slightly darker in the sketch to distinguish the coloration in the features of the mushroom. Again, this tutorial is done with simple graphite pencils and pen. It is done on a digital drawing medium. However, you can apply traditional drawing mediums to this particular tutorial and play around with color, and that is where you can kind of look at reference images from the internet. But otherwise, make sure you work on each mushroom, slowly refining their shape and outlines and adding in some details. We also want to make sure we add shading under the skirt or the annulus in the middle of the stem. But otherwise, take your time drawing the ridges under the caps of the mushroom, making sure they flow along the inside of the mushroom cap. We want to make sure that the ridges move around the mushroom cap and connect to the center of the mushroom in this spoke-like fashion, almost like the spokes on a bicycle wheel, or a circular fashion. Another thing we want to think about is how we add in the little details to the cap. So lastly, we want to work with our erasers and add in these little spores along the caps of the mushroom. Again, if you're working with a drawing process, you can use your eraser to create these highlighted spots in the cap, or you can work with a lighter medium on top of those areas. These are iconic of the Amanita mushroom, which we can enhance by adding darker outline to each little spore to represent a little bit more three-dimensionality in these very little features. But otherwise, guys, this is the process of how to draw the Amanita mushroom, and as we proceed, we are now going to look at how to draw an oyster mushroom. Now, oyster mushrooms seem quite alive because of how they grow in groups, and this gives them a very distinct aesthetic. So oyster mushrooms also have a very beautiful shape to them because of how they curve in their stalks. So let's take a look at how we can draw this very unique mushroom, and we start once again with the same sequence of steps, starting by sketching the form of the mushroom. Now we want to start by drawing a few of the dome shaped caps spread out, and we also want to make sure that they are different sizes, and these caps have quite a flat and slightly dome shape to them. So from there, we want to continue by drawing the stalks of the mushroom, which we will curve from the cap into a central point. But otherwise, as we continue from there, we want to continue by drawing the stalks of the mushroom, which will curve from the cap into a central point. We want to make sure that But otherwise, from there, we want to continue by drawing the stalks of the mushroom, which will curve from the cap into a central point. We want to make sure that some mushrooms higher up will have a stalk that falls behind the mushroom in the foreground. Once we have done this, we can then erase and refine our mushroom sketch once again. So we have established the basic outline of the oyster mushroom, which we now then can basically move on to lightly erasing the shape. From here, we can start working in some more detailed drawing marks, and this is where we can use those ghost lines once again. It's always a good idea to look at a reference image as you kind of draw something very specific, in this case a set of mushrooms. So you can look at various oyster mushroom images on the internet to assist you in your drawing process. As we work in details on the mushroom, we also want to make sure that the gills or ridges flow along the stalk shape of each mushroom. We can also add some darkened shading to the caps of the mushroom with a slight highlight on each side, just to suggest a light reflection of the surface area of the cap. The smooth cap of the oyster mushroom allows for a slight reflection of light, so that's why we kind of want to really emphasize that quality with shading. Once again, you can work that in with your pencil or pen, but the idea is to really have a little bit of highlights within that cap on our actual oyster mushrooms. And then we can also darken the ridges slightly near the caps of each mushroom, and that is it. A simple way to draw the oyster mushroom, and just another beautiful one to add to your drawing repertoire that can easily be integrated into various artworks. But otherwise, we're going to move on to the last one, and that is how to draw the Boletus mushroom. So lastly, we will be drawing this classic Boletus mushroom. This mushroom is the more classic and iconic aesthetic of a mushroom that people normally associate the appearance of a mushroom with. It's also very beautiful beautiful and simple looking mushroom with subtle features. So let's see how we can draw this iconic mushroom. Now, once again, same sequence of steps. Starting by sketching the form of the mushroom, we want to start with a simple outline of the mushroom, which we can do so by drawing a stalk and a cap. The stalk is quite normal and narrow, whereas the cap is quite fat and dome shaped in comparison. But once we have done that and kind of established the general form and shape of the mushroom, we can then move on to erasing and refining the mushroom sketch. Once we have this basic form of the mushroom established, we can then proceed to lightly erase the mushroom, once again leaving behind some ghost lines to assist us as we create a more refined sketch of the mushroom. We can add some shading along the stalk to create some curvature in its structure, but as we continue to do so, we also want to make sure that the underside of the cap has a slightly bulging curve to its body. We want to add some shading to the underside of the cap as well to give a little bit more textural quality to this feature, and we can also start adding shading to the top dome part of the cap. We can also add a little indentation to give a little few unique attributes to the mushroom as well. So you can play around with these details, again look at some reference images to assist you, but the idea is to just spend some time refining these details using the ghost lines that you have left behind after erasing the general shape of the mushroom. But then we can move on to adding some unique details to the mushroom. So we want to make sure that the top dome is slightly darker in tone, which once again is unique to the appearance of the Boletus species. We also want to start adding in some little dots on the underside of the cap to suggest pores within the mushroom. Now take your time adding some dots to the underside of the cap. This will give a little bit more of a realistic texture as well to the mushroom, which once again is just a unique quality of the Boletus mushroom. And we can also make sure the shading along the top dome is slightly darker. Otherwise, there you have it guys, a few simple steps on how to draw various mushroom species in various ways. Once again, this tutorial is done with simple drawing materials just to assist you and kind of define the simple process of how to establish mushrooms. You can play around with color, and you can obviously refer to various reference images to assist you in your drawing process. But otherwise guys, mushrooms are really fun to draw. They make for such a good visual addition to so many different genres of art, whether it's in landscapes or creating these large scale micro universes with various creatures. There's so many ways to play around with being creative in terms of how we can use this very unique visual quality. Mushrooms also come in way more species than demonstrated in this tutorial, so you can kind of apply the same process to various other mushrooms that you're interested in drawing. But otherwise guys, thanks again for tuning in. That is it from me today. If you did like the video, please let us know in the comment section below if you are interested in similar or related topics on fungus, plants, you name it. Let us know and we will get to it. But otherwise, thanks again for tuning in. Please like and subscribe, show your support. That helps us to grow the channel, which ultimately enables us to make more fun art content that we love to share with you guys. But once again, thanks. See you next time. Cheers.